Hi, I'm Jeremy. Welcome to Freedom of Expression, where I am here to express the truth. Because I'm tired of lies and manipulation, and it's what politicians do consistently all the time, and there's just no accountability for them whatsoever. And as the channel grows, it'll grow into a website, and we're going to deal with this a lot. So what we have here is just the police, because we're going to be talking about defunding the police, how it was a big thing for a little while, and now there's all this talk about refunding the police and missing the mark, the lack of accountability of politicians. It's people want change. I think there are definitely some people that they're looking at defunding the police because they want to attack that institution, because that institution is not helping in the way that it was supposed to do at the beginning. That the police should be handling just like the worst crimes. Three obvious examples of this are theft, rape, murder. Yes, we want the police to handle those things, but the police, their power and their scope has become well beyond all that. Some examples of this is that they now go into businesses and they will harass store owners over COVID. It's like, no, you don't get to tell me what to do with my body. What is it that the feminists like to say? My body, my choice. It's like, well, take your double standards of hypocrisy and shove it. I'm not playing any of these games. Or whenever they're being used as a tool from the mayor or the governor of a city or a state, it's like, no, that is not the function of the police to be some kind of bullies. To go out and to deal with all of these that they call small little level crimes. It's like, no, that's not what the police were designed for. It doesn't help anything. From my understanding is that the justice system was meant to bring justice and to reform people, to have them be productive members of society. That the prison system was never designed to be a permanent solution for housing criminals. I worked at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for a while as a corrections officer out there, and they have all these rooms out there at the prison where it was set up for counseling and all this stuff, and they are vacant. They just use them for storage. They've got a lot of chairs stacked up in the corners and some tables, and they're just not using them for anything. And I know why. It's because reforming someone, it's not like, hey, take 2 of these and then call me in the morning and you'll be all fine. It's like, no, it's really complicated. And the police system has been turned into this massive system of abuse. And this cycle of just continuously sending these people back into prison, big cash grab, instead of actually doing any good. And I 100% firmly believe that there are people out there who are like, stop, enough. You know what, sending someone off to prison doesn't do anything for them. Now, yes, absolutely. My time working out there at the prison system showed me that there are people where, yes, they should live and breathe and die out there because something is wrong with them, and they are just, not only is something wrong with them, but they are extremely physically violent. And I don't know what else to do with such people. But it's just like with the homelessness. Those people, a lot of them, they're mentally disabled or handicapped in some way. And the answer is not just let them be. It's like, no, being on the street is not the answer for homeless people. We have a system for the other 2 groups. We have one major group divided into 3 subgroups. The major subgroup are people who are mentally incapable of taking care of themselves. And the 3 subgroups are children, senior citizens in cognitive decline, and people who are mentally handicapped, either because of birth or through some kind of unfortunate accident that's happened to them. With children, we put them in foster care and adoption centers. With senior citizens, we have retirement centers for them. Why do we not have anything for the people who are mentally incapable? It's like they're out there. There's lots of them too. And some of them are fortunate where they have friends and family who are willing to step up and to take care and provide for these people. But what about the ones who don't? And it's the same thing with this with crime. It's like just like the answer is not throwing homeless people out on the streets, the answer is not throwing these criminals into this endless loop of fines and a hole that they can't dig themselves out of, and not explaining to them as to why the actions that they've been taking is what's leading them down this path, and that there are other things that you need to be doing with yourself than doing these things. But it's more complicated than that. It's like, well, how do you do more for yourself whenever you were in a poor education system and you don't have the skills to go out and get a job, and whenever they keep raising the minimum wage, and that puts more people out of the job market. So what are they supposed to do? It's like, well, go and do crime because it's easy. You don't need any requirements for that. You don't have to go and get a degree for it. So if you're tired of the lies and the manipulation, before we go any further, help me out and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, join and become a member. I've got Patreon and Subscribestar too. All the links are down in the description below. And with all of these videos, I'll put links in the description below for any and all videos that I put on here. And so this is coming about because I saw this video. I don't watch him very often. His name and his channel is Matt Christensen. This video is titled, "Portland Begs Police to Come Back, but Nobody Even Applies. No Refunds After Defunds." Now, I'm not going to play what he says because I don't like this stuff of people who are just, I mean, it's fine. People just kind of reporting on the news and kind of what's going on. I mean, obviously it's all right. I do watch that stuff. But I want a solution to this stuff. I'm tired of just dragging our feet, and a lot of it is these politicians who just kind of, they go to the crowd and they rile them up and nothing gets done. Nothing at all. So let's go ahead, and what I wanted to show is just, he's got some news articles that he displays. I don't know where they're from, or otherwise I would just kind of leave him out of it and just show the news article. So let's go ahead and take a look at what he shows here. And so here's one. So he's talking about how they were talking about defunding the police, and now they want to refund the police. They want to bring all of this money back because crime is skyrocketing. So the title of this one is Minneapolis Council Moves to Defund Police, Establish Historic Public Safety Force. You're just, that sounds like we want to replace the police with a different kind of police. We're just giving it a different name. How is that any different? That makes no sense. And here's a bunch of, looks like a bunch of white people holding up signs, and it's like, this isn't what does it. This is this is what I guess you can do to get the government involved, but the government doesn't solve problems. Politicians only care about getting reelected. Republicans and Democrats both are trash. Democrats, right now, they're the ones who are going with the mob, and the Republicans are doing nothing. They just sit back and let this stuff happen, and neither of them are really trying to address the issues anywhere close to where the actual source of the problem is, as far as I'm concerned. So now, after that, Minneapolis violent crimes soar in 2020 amid pandemic protests. I'll throw them a little bit of a bone, though, is that with shutdowns, that also triggered people and got them even more riled up. And again, this is something else where it's just politicians who are just, they don't care what's true. It's like, as far as I know, that the pandemic was nonsense. It was completely 100% blown out of proportions. I just saw last week where Ben Shapiro was talking about in San Francisco that they were going to have masks again and go into lockdown and all this kind of nonsense stuff. And he said, in the past 7 days, there hasn't been one single person who's died from COVID yet. They're going to do all of this. And the Delta variant is supposed to be worse than ever. It's because they like to use wordplay. They like to screw with you with what it is that they're saying. They want to talk about cases and not the deaths. It's like, I don't care. I don't care how many people get COVID. I care about how many people are dying from COVID. Same thing with the flu. I don't care how many people get the flu. I care about how many people die from it. If all of a sudden, if people are dying in droves from the flu, it's like, oh yeah, maybe we should talk about. I don't see lockdowns ever being an answer to any of this stuff, but having masks and antibacterial stuff and disinfectant and all that, it's like, well, yeah, then you're making a case for all that stuff, and we should all kind of step it up and do more. But locking down the economy makes absolutely no sense to me in any shape, fashion, or form whatsoever. And then he has highlighted here, violent crime soar by 21% in Minneapolis last year. And then I bet this one's going to be, Minneapolis City Council votes to increase police budget to hire new recruits. And this is in 2021. So, yep, it seems like each year that they're changing their minds. You know what's not going on? What are the lessons that they're learning from this? What was it? Oh, Cuomo over there in New York. It looks like he might be getting ousted because of some women, some aides. One of them was in law enforcement, about going and pressing charges on Cuomo for sexual harassment. And some of it was like, yep, that's like really weird. Other stuff, it was like, you're kind of really pushing that stuff right there. I don't agree with it at all. But there's a lot of hype around it. And people are like, well, at least he's getting out of office. If this is what takes him down, it's like, but that's not anything. That's not good at all. He supposedly, from my understanding, is that he killed a bunch of senior citizens because he let a bunch of old people who had COVID into senior citizen retirement homes who were the most vulnerable to this. And that's why they have the highest mortality rate with senior citizens concerning COVID. It's like, if nothing is changed, if no one's learned from this, then there's no guarantee at all of any kind that the next person who comes into office will be any better than what you have. I can give an example of this as being a landlord, is that getting rid of a tenant does not guarantee that the next tenant is going to be better than the one that you had before. So you really want to work with the one that you have. Or here's another example. At whatever business it is that you're working at, and if you're in a position of power where you can hire or fire people, or if you're in a position where it's like, yeah, I can get this person fired, there's no guarantee that the person that they're going to replace this horrible person with is going to be any better. They could be just as bad, or they could be even worse. So if you don't make some kind of real substantial change, which means that it needs to be meaningful, and it's not just somebody's opinion, it needs to be based off of something, then it's just an endless circle. It's like, I don't care how many times they defund and refund the police if they don't ever learn from it. It's like, why are you doing this? Why did you defund the police in the first place? Why are you refunding them now? What's going to prevent you from doing it again in the future? But that's politicians. I mean, who was it that was held accountable for defunding the police in the first place? Shouldn't they be held accountable for the spike of crimes and having to come back and refund it? It doesn't make any sense to me. This isn't the way that it is in real life. That if you, I don't know, I can just pick something. If you go into an auto parts store or a mechanic shop and you're having work done on your vehicle, say you take it into the Ford dealership, that's a good example, and you say, I need it worked on, I've got these issues. You take it on in and they do a bad job, you get to hold the dealership in place. But it doesn't stop there. They continue to point the finger. They try to get to the source of it. The dealership's going to point towards the mechanic. The mechanic is going to point towards, so the Ford dealership, whenever they hire mechanics, they go through a training kind of thing. They learn the specifics a little bit. It's not too much because they do have their degree or their trade school equivalent of how to work on vehicles. But I believe, I think that Ford and all these dealerships, they kind of have their own certification thing. It's like, yeah, we're certified to work on Fords. I mean, we're the Ford dealership. Of course, it kind of makes sense. I don't know exactly what that entails, I guess. I haven't really looked into it specifically. But they're going to keep pointing the finger. They're going to be like, okay, well, where did you get your training from? Oh, I went to this trade school. Oh, you know what? Well, that's horrible. And they're going to want to know more and more, because one of the things that they're going to do is that if they ever see graduates from that trade school again, they're going to say, you know what? We're really not interested. We've had a couple of candidates who worked for us who went to this trade school, and they just don't know what they're doing, and they're costing us a lot of money. And so they can nip it off at the bud. And then what happens? Then that trade school that did the training gets a bad reputation. It's like, man, I'm looking to go to trade school myself to learn how to do mechanic work, and I've got my choices, and I don't know of all of them, but I know with this one, they're horrible. Just bad complaints all the time. And with this one, they're great. And so if I'm going to spend my money somewhere and I'm going to waste my time doing all this, I'm going to put it where it counts the most. And then the one that's bad, they're done. But we don't have this with politics. Why don't we look at the politicians and say, where did you get this from? Oh, you got it from this university or this professor or this other professional? Well, where did they get that from? Where is it? It's like, if Dr. Fauci, for example, has been lying, I want to know, and I want his credit with anything medical destroyed. Because if he's been lying, it's like, I don't want you doing anything. I don't want you helping anyone, because nobody ever knows when you're telling the truth and when you're lying. Go find one of the billion of other jobs that are available out there on the planet and go do that. You are not entitled to keep your PhD as a doctor and be a medical professional if you lie and you manipulate and you do all that other stuff. Why is there special privilege for the government, their politicians, their friends? Screw them all. We all get screwed, so should they. Whenever they do something bad, it's not a free ticket. What is that, Monopoly? Pass go, collect $200. It's like, no, you pass go, you don't collect $200, and you go straight to jail. We're going to continue on here, see what next. All right, Los Angeles City Council votes to cut LAPD budget by $150 million. This is in July 2nd, 2020. And then down here, LA Wednesday approved $150 million cut to Los Angeles Police Department's budget for the next fiscal year. A move that followed activists mounting calls to defund the police. I don't care about activists. I do not care about some people who have nothing better to do than just wander around in the streets, yelling and screaming, holding up signs. That's not research. That's not science. That's not evidence. That is absolutely nothing. How does making the police reduce their numbers help with crime in any way? It's like, does something need to be done? I think absolutely 100%. But it's not this. It's like, what are these people listening to? What are they watching? What are their conversations about? How is it that they go into this stuff? Because it's not being black, because there are black people who are successful all up and down the spectrum. And there are more white people who are on welfare than black. It's because something is wrong in here. Because of their communities, their opportunities. It could just be that, maybe there are some people out there who just don't want to be materialistic. Maybe there are some people out there who just don't want to work like a slave. And then what happens? They get caught up because they're just kind of, maybe they're naive, and then they get propagated into this downward spiral, and it just makes them more and more bitter. So, for example, one of the things that I learned whenever I was working out there at the prison was that after being incarcerated for 2 years, that any kind of positive effect is worn off, and that after that 2 year period, anything beyond 2 years, it starts to have a very huge negative effect. But you start having a negative effect almost immediately, and it's because part of it is that people are scared whenever they first go to prison, because prison does not have a good rap, at least here in the United States. If you're somewhere else, I don't know about there, but here in the U.S., they think of gangs and violence and stabbings and rapings and all that kind of stuff, and all that stuff happens. So they're very scared, they're very timid, and it's like, yeah, I don't want to be here. And so I think that's a little bit of what they're talking about, how there is a little bit of a positive thing that happens, but only that first time, only within the first 2 years. But the longer that you're there, the more you kind of adjust, you adapt, and you readjust to kind of what's your new norm. And it's like, well, yeah, that's what happens. People adjust all the time because everything changes. And so I want to get to more of the root of the problem. Things go well, that hopefully I can have this website go and be real strong. I think the website will be around much longer than I am, hopefully. But one of the things that I want to do is that I have no problems at all doing a GoFundMe and raising up money and figuring out a permanent revenue, which I would like the website to be profitable enough that instead of paying big board members and CEO and stockholders large sums of money, I would rather just have that money go into funding those places for the mentally disabled. I think they should be walled off just like a prison, but on the inside, because they need to be protected from predators, but on the inside it should be a mix of kind of a elderly retirement center, because they're going to retire there. I mean, they can't do anything. And if you've known people who are who don't function, you know, they don't have the capacity to do that. They're very child-esque. And so I think everything on the inside should be made as childish as possible, where adults would look at it and say, yeah, this place is a nightmare. But children would be like, this is wonderful, this is great. You could think of it kind of like something along the lines of Disneyland. Lots of toys, lots of cartoons, lot of fun little children things, but nothing adult. You know, you're not going to go to a bar. You're not going to have alcohol. You're not going to have cigarettes. It's not going to be fancy and stylish GQ stuff. No, it's going to be Nickelodeon and Goofy and stuff like that. And then if you do feel like that you've been put in there wrongly, then here's a big list of things that if you can do these things, then you can leave. And it would be things that, yes, these are like the basic things that every single person needs to be able to do, such as get up in the morning on time, go through your morning routine, be able to take care of cooking your own food, preparing your own meals, taking care of your own place, doing your laundry, spending your time working for like an 8-hour shift for at least 40 hours a week. Really, it should be a little bit more than that. One of the problems with welfare is that it's a system of enabling instead of a system of productivity, because we just give people money for nothing. It's like, no, they should be doing something. And it could be the same thing. It's like, here's a bunch of things that if you want to get money from welfare, then you have to do these things, and you should be working 50 hours a week instead of 40 hours a week. And that would be one of the things that would push people to getting off of welfare. If the minimum wage in your area gives you roughly $200 a week for 40 hours of work, then you're going to get 200 hours a week for 50, or $200 a week for 50 hours of work. So yeah, you go and you get your own job, then that's 50 or 10 hours less that you'll be working. Anyways, let's go ahead and continue. So here Los Angeles cut the budget. A year like no other for LA crime. Homicides surge, robberies and rapes drop. So let's read this a little bit here. LAPD officer closed the road leading to a scene in Hollywood Hills where Pop Smoke, a rising New York rapper, was fatally shot. Oh, I guess his name was Pop Smoke. A year like no other. So homicides surge, but yet robberies and rapes drop. I wonder why. You would think that they would all increase. You know what? Or they're just too busy killing instead of doing the other stuff. I don't know. But murders go on the rise. They surge, supposedly, according to this source. And here it says, it's a slap in the face. LA activists protest mayor's police budget increase. And here's a bunch of hippies saying defund the police. It's like, it's not the problem. It's not the problem. I mean, there are problems with the police, but it's other problems than this. It's like, have they gone too far? They have. But part of the reason is it's also, well, where else are you going to turn to kind of solve these problems if you're not going to really dive into the source of it? So anyways, families of people killed by Los Angeles police called this week's verdict in the Chauvin trial a win, but are pushed forward with demands to defund. Los Angeles activists. I do not care about activists. I'm getting so sick and tired of hearing about activists. Because it's like, I would be more in tune with activists. One of the things that I think is wrong with politicians is that they're not held accountable. And one of the ways that we could do this is by having them list all of their policies and political issues that they're running for. And then whenever they get into office, that list stays. And it's up front and center. And that's what they have to stick with no matter what. It's not they get into office and then they just get to change their minds. It's like, no, absolutely not. This is what you ran on. You are running because you are supposed to be a representative of the people. So that's what you have to do. Now, if there's something big that happens that might encourage some kind of change, so for example, maybe your stance on the medical industry, that could change if something like COVID happens. It's like, well, okay, yeah, that would be it. But if there's not something significant that happens, it's like you don't get to change your mind. You do your term, and then after your term is done, then you can change your mind. But until then, you have to honor those promises. And so the same thing with these activists. It's like, okay, well, where's your proof for all of this? I want to know. I want these listed. And I want you to clearly define these things. Why? Why defund the police? What is this going to accomplish? What are you targeting to do? Because I have found nothing. It's just a bunch of platitudes, a bunch of stupid little things. Something that you can put on a sign and it just means absolutely nothing. It's like defund the police. What the hell does that mean? How's that going to do anything? How's that going to help these people? If you defund the police, how much defunding do you have to do before it helps that guy cure his alcoholism? How much defunding of the police is it going to take so that this person's going to rebuild their bridges with their friends and family when those bridges have been burned? How much are you going to have to defund the police that it's going to make these people smarter, that it's going to raise their IQ, or they're going to go and find a job and to work, that they're just going to be happy? How much is going to have to be taken from the police for that to happen? Makes no sense to me at all whatsoever. Let's continue. The Baltimore City Council eliminated $22 million from the police budget. What does that look like? I'm curious too. Since the police in these areas don't have these millions of dollars, where did it go? Did you get it back? Did people get refunds? Did it slip into the hands of politicians or their constituents in some way? As the Baltimore City Council met to debate the police budget, protesters, again, it's like, I do not care. I do not care about lunatics yelling and screaming. It's like, if you've got something that's worthwhile, then you make a change to the system and you make it better. Because you just can't throw it away. You just can't have anarchy and chaos. Because there are people out there, 100%, that part of their mental inability to be able to function in society is that they are violent. And I've met those people whenever I worked for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Because they have high security out there, and those people will you just look at them wrong. And it's just, fight for your life is now on. Anyways. Protesters gather outside City Hall hoping to make their views clear. In tall pink letters, they painted "Defund the Police" on a downtown street. It's like, if you have views that are actually clear, then elect politicians to back you up to do this, to make it the law or the change in the departments or whatever it is that you need to do. This, to me, seems like this is underhanded. It's like, no, all these people voted for these politicians, but yet this small minority of this area wants to come and scream, shout, and rave about all this stuff. And they're the ones, it's just like those people on Twitter. It's like, it's what? 2% of the population are these Twitter activists? What? Continuing. And then this article, with Baltimore close to the 300 homicide mark again, leaders mull over the new approaches amid some signs of improvement. The grim benchmark has been arrived each year around this time, landing in Baltimore as the weather turns colder and the holiday season approaches. For the 6th straight year, Baltimore is on pace to record at least 300 homicides, leaving the city's political, civil, and law enforcement leaders again searching for ways to reduce the rates of violence, which not even a pandemic could stop. So, great. Wonderful news. Next one, defund police, not in Baltimore. Mayor Scott increases city police budget. There's an outcry from Baltimore's city taxpayers after an online budget forum Thursday night. Many of those who testified were angry that Mayor Scott proposed spending plan for the next fiscal year actually increases the budget of the Baltimore Police Department. It comes after the mayor promised to reimagine policing in the city. The city's policing board approved the proposed budget 2 weeks ago, which totals about $4.3 billion. Yeah, screw these activists. The activists don't represent the people. And these activists, I know some of them, they don't even live in these places. They'll come in from out of town. You know what most people do? They have a life. That's what they do. They live their lives. They go to work. They spend time with their friends and family. They have hobbies. They take vacations. And this is not what normal people do. What normal people do is, whenever the elections come, they try to look to see what's going on with the politicians and what their stands are. And whenever it's done, they expect that politician to do their job, to keep their campaign promises, and to fight for what it is that they were preaching about on that campaign trail. But they have no responsibility to this whatsoever, and so they just swish-swash all over the place. Doesn't matter. Republicans, Democrats, every last one of them. Let's continue. So I think that's it. I think he's done. And then he talks a little bit about this, and he continues to talk about how, yeah, they defunded all these places, crime went up, and now all this refunding is going on. It's like, it's interesting to a point, but one of the things that's always missed with all of these things is, well, what do we do about it? How do we keep this from happening again? What in like another 5 or 10 years, whenever you've got a new generation that's come up and they're filled with this nonsense from this poor education that they've got, we're going to be doing this again? Because nobody bothered to take notes? It's like, yeah, no, that's going to change. because as my channel and my support grows, it's like, no, we're going to take notes. Lots and lots and lots. And we're going to see what actually happens. Not your platitudes, not your vague, stupid little phrases, not these little catchy terms, not these buzzwords. What actually happens? And then we're going to stay away from the things that don't work, and we're going to take steps forward to the things that show some kind of improvement. And it's not going to be this stupid magic land fairy tale utopia. It's like, well, that's not perfect. Duh. Thanks a lot there, Captain Obvious. But we've made things better, and as long as we keep doing that, then yeah, it's the reason why we don't live in caves. It's like, we're not in spaceships, and we can't solve all of our medical problems, but because we keep taking steps forward, that's why we're doing better than we were then. So if you've understood this, and you too are tired of being lied to and manipulated, then hit the like button, give it a thumbs up, and you know what, I don't expect you to catch all of these videos. You know what, I understand, watch others, that's fine. You know, and it's going to be a while until we get to that, but whenever you do watch one of these videos, it's like, yep, man, thumbs that thing up. Subscribe and become a member. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you've learned something, and we will see you again later. Thanks for watching. Bye.